Hello everyone, this is the video of Legal Studies, Class 12, Unit 1st, that is Judiciary, and the topic is Independence and Impartiality of Indian Judiciary. This is very interesting topic and very conceptual as well that you need to understand in order to appreciate the whole judicial system. There are two terms here, independence and impartiality. So these two terms may sound similar, but they are distinct, but they are interlinked. So first we will discuss the independence of Indian judiciary and then impartiality basically of judges, not the Indian judiciary, rather of judges. So we will discuss later. So let's begin with the independence of judiciary. The judiciary's independence, in fact, is ensured by the supreme law of the land, that is what? Constitution. The Article 50 of the Constitution separates the judiciary from the executive. If you just go through my previous video as well, and if you remember that, then you can easily notice that some of the points I kept on repeating because of the nature of those points that everywhere coming. One of those points is the Article 50 of the Constitution that separates judiciary from the executive, and this is the place from where judiciary derives its independence. Though there are number of provisions that ensure the independence of judiciary, but this is the most essential one. Although all are the essential, but this is the first one. You can say like this. The next one is, further, to maintain the principle of rule of law, the judicial independence is prime necessity. So what it means that rule of law, that we know that this is the system of rule of law. So law basically governs, not the person. So in such a system, if judiciary is supposed to be dependent on something, then the rule of law concept or principle will be in threat. So in order to secure the principle of rule of law, independence of judiciary is essential. On top of this, given such a responsible position, the judiciary needs to work in an independent atmosphere so that it can take unbiased and impartial decision. So now I believe you can understand this point and you can interpret this point in your language as well. It means that if judiciary won't be independent, then it won't be able to deliver the decision impartially. So independence of judiciary is very, very important. But now the question is how to ensure that judiciary is independent. So what are the things, what are the characteristics, features that you have studied by the time? Based on that you can say that judiciary is independent. So there must be some characteristics that defining the independence of judiciary. So what are those characteristics? So let's check it out one by one. The first one is appointment of judges. Okay, the appointment of judges of the Supreme Court as well as High Court is lengthy process. Though a judge of Supreme Court and High Court is appointed by the President on the advice of the Council of Ministers, especially by Prime Minister and Law Minister. And in case of High Court judges, two more persons, namely Governor and Chief Minister. However, the role of judiciary, specifically of Chief Justice of India and other senior most judges of Supreme Court, and in case of High Court, the Chief Justice of the respective High Court, is crucial. Basically, these judges prepare the list of the candidates, shortlist the candidates and recommend to the President. So the major role is done by the judiciary itself and the final approval is given by the President. So the first point, appointment of judges, ensures the independence of judiciary. But don't worry, in my subsequent videos, we will be discussing the appointment of judges of the High Court, appointment of judges of the Supreme Court, and the appointment of judges of the District Court in detail. So don't worry. Next one is security of the tenure. What does it mean? That once the judge either of the High Court or of the Supreme Court appointed, his job or his position is secured, and in normal circumstance he cannot be removed, rather he retires after attaining the age of 65 in case of Supreme Court and 62 in case of High Court. So it is the only retirement procedure. However, in rare circumstance he can be removed, but that is very lengthy process. We will check that in the next point. The next point is removal of the judges. A judge can be removed only on the ground of misbehavior or incapacity. However, the removal process of Supreme Court judge or High Court judge is very complex and lengthy, that takes months' time. The removal process can be done only after proper investigation and then passing the removal motion in the Parliament with 2/3 majority, that is present and voting. So see the kind of complex process it is. However, in my subsequent video I would have the separate video on the removal of the judges. So there we will be discussing in detail step by step how a judge can be removed, and there you can appreciate how lengthy process it is. So the lengthy process of a removal of a judge ensures the independence of judiciary. The next point is restriction of the law practice. This is interesting point, you should understand. A retired judge is not allowed to practice as advocate in the same or equivalent court. What does it mean? That so a retired judge of the Supreme Court cannot practice in any court including the Supreme Court. So if you are a judge of the Supreme Court, after retirement you are not allowed to practice any of the court in this country. However, a retired judge of High Court is restricted to practice in the same High Court from where he retired and all the lower courts of India, but he can practice in other High Courts or in the Supreme Court of India. The purpose behind restricting the judges, basically retired judges, to practice, there is possibility to influence the judgment of the bench. How? Well, if a judge is supposed to be practicing in the same court from where he retired, then he must have the familiarity with other judges when he was in the office. So based on that familiarity, judges who are supposed to be going to decide or give the judgment may get influence. So in order to ensure the impartiality, such independence of judiciary is essential. So this point, that is restriction of law practice, ensures the independence of judiciary as well as the impartiality of judges, that we will be discussing later. The next point is the salary and allowances of judges are fixed and not the subject to vote of the legislature. What does it mean? That the salary of judges are fixed and cannot be altered in normal circumstances. So whatever the salary a judge draw, it is not the subject to vote. It cannot be curtailed. So that will remain fixed. However, in certain circumstances, as you can see the financial crisis, it may be in the present condition that is going to because of this coronavirus. In such a condition, government may reduce the salary, but this is the rare condition. The next point is principles of non-interference by other branches of government. The conduct of judges of the Supreme Court cannot be discussed in the Parliament, and the judges of High Courts cannot be discussed in a state legislature, except when a removal motion is introduced in the House. So in normal circumstance, whatever the judge's procedure and the judge acts, that cannot be discussed in the Parliament if it is the case of Supreme Court, and in the state legislature if it is the case of High Court. So judges are immune from such acts. However, if it is the removal motion that is introduced in the House, then that can be discussed. Lastly, on top of this, the Supreme Court of India has been authorized to have its own establishment and to have complete control over it. So, judiciary has its own system over which Supreme Court has exclusive authority. It can run the way it wants. So, implementation of all such provisions satisfactorily enables the judiciary to perform its due role in the society independently and impartially. Now, whatever the kind of independence we have discussed through all these points, that can be categorized as personal independence. It means the judges are not dependent on government in any way in which might get influenced from them in reaching a decision in any of the cases. So, this is the personal independence of the judge, that he cannot be influenced by any government person and by government itself. So, this is the personal independence. Second one is functional independence. It means the judges are immune and hence can make any decision without submitting any sort of inside or outside pressure. So, since because of the personal independence, judges can function independently or impartially. So, this is functional independence. The third one is internal independence. What does it mean? That the judges or judicial officers are independent to make their decision based on the given facts and evidence, and they are not obliged to follow any kind of order or indication or pressure from their judicial superiors and colleagues while deciding the cases. See, this is the internal independence. What does it mean? That if a judge of a district court making any judgment or any decision, he doesn't supposed to get influenced by the judge of the High Court or the Supreme Court. So, he has been given this much authority to decide the case independently and impartially. So, there is possibility of internal corruption, there is possibility of internal influence. So, in order to avoid such kind of mishappening or corruption or influence, such kind of independence, that is internal independence, is secured. Next one is, and the last one is, collective independence. It means the institutional, administrative and financial independence of judiciary as a whole. So, it is talking about the judicial system as a whole. So, as we have discussed in my above points as well, judiciary's independence as a whole, because it has its own structure, function and everything. Now, we have the last topic of this video, that is impartiality. As we have discussed in the beginning of this video itself, that independence and impartiality both are two terms and both are distinct from each other, but both are linked. At least, independence of judiciary ensures the impartiality of the judges. So, this is how it is concluded. So, let us check it out. Though the concept of judges' impartiality is distinct from the independence of judiciary, but both are pretty interlinked with each other, as the independence of judiciary ensures the impartiality of judges. Fine. However, the judges who are the constituent actors of judiciary are expected to be impartial, which means without personal bias or prejudice toward individuals while deciding the cases and delivering the judgment. Judges should apply the laws uniformly and consistently to all persons by keeping Article 14 of the Constitution in mind. So, while deciding the cases, judges have to keep in mind the Article 14. What does that article state? That is the equality before the law and equal protection of the laws. So, this is all for this video, as we have discussed so many conceptual points regarding the independence of judiciary and impartiality of the judges. I believe you must understood all these points. Nevertheless, I still repeat to watch this video again, because this is very interesting and important topic. You have to understand this topic in order to appreciate the other topics related to judiciary. So, see you in next video.